to solve for that disconnect, I think we must start understanding the client. Where do they stand in terms of tolerance with regards to plan spend, right? But let's face it, it's our job to help peel back the onion a bit, peel back the layers of the onion, and to see which way do they lean.
Welcome to the Leader's Edge podcast. I'm Katie King, VP of Health Policy and Strategy at the Council. In this podcast, I sit down with Dr. Simon Leung, Vice President and Head of Pharmacy at Strong Buckelew, to talk about how his past experience as a PharmD informs his new role, as well as his take on the value of transparency in the pharmacy benefit space. Dr. Leung sits in a unique position where he's been behind the curtain with major health insurers, transparent PBMs, with patients at the pharmacy counter, and now in the consulting space. He believes that all of the different industry players agree that it's about serving the patient, but that people have different views on how to achieve that goal. Take a listen.
Yeah, I have 20 years in the pharmacy industry experience. Just thinking about it last night, it's almost 20 years to the date, because I remember specifically, taking my pharmacy board exams and getting officially licensed the day before my birthday 20 years ago. And I just celebrated my birthday yesterday. So almost to the date that 20 years in the industry as a registered pharmacist, working across, many realms of the industry, working as a retail and specialty pharmacy leader. And then after that, I decided to branch out and go into other aspects of pharmacy. Now that I have experience in everything, working for health plans, PBMs, both large and small ones, new and old ones, as well as pharmacy consulting. And now here at Strong, I take great pride in being able to, bring all that expertise and experience together to help our clients here design impactful and meaningful pharmacy programs that improve not only their employees' health, but ultimately to help mitigate costs whenever possible. I will say, however, that I think my collective experience is somewhat unique in this marketplace. I can appreciate and understand all sides of a typical pharmacy or prescription drug transaction, right? The provider, the payer, as well as the member or patient side. Having that retail experience behind the bench, working behind the bench, I know what it's like for members to be told their medicine isn't covered, or that their prescription needs a prior authorization, or even working through a change in their insurance at the beginning of the year. You have a mom and dad coming in New Year's Day with a sick child, and they can't get their prescription to get covered, because they didn't realize or they forgot that they got a new prescription insurance card in the mail. I've helped, members work through these firsthand. So, at the same time, I also know what it's like on the pharmacy consulting side to help businesses craft their pharmacy benefit plans to drive plan savings. So again, I could truly appreciate and understand the balance that's needed there. And ultimately, though, the member experience is what drives member benefits. And my prior experience with the members, the consumers themselves, isn't all that common in the pharmacy benefit advisor space.
Yeah, that absolutely is a really unique place that you sit, just given your experience. And obviously, prescription drug costs are continuing to rise, and patients feel that. They feel that at the pharmacy counter. And it's felt differently, among employers, or if you're a pharmacy consultant, or if you're some other player in the industry. But I'm curious, just given your experience and the fact that you've spent time with different segments in the industry, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the disconnects, or maybe some of the miscommunication that you see happening between all those different players, and sort of what that means.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I have to think back to when I first moved into the pharmacy consulting space. A former mentor of mine affectionately called me a reformed bank robber, right? Because I was able to bring that knowledge, the insights, the experience gained from the inner workings of PBMs and carriers to the client side of the table, right? And all the while, again, having intimate knowledge and experience working on the front lines with patients at the point of service. Having seen all sides, I realized one thing that is, while there are certainly disconnects amongst all these parties, every player is connected by the universal understanding that the most important part of pharmacy and benefit plans in general is taking care of that patient's health, right? What everyone fights over and truly is at odds about, however, is how to get to that outcome while making sure the financials make the most sense for their own interest, not necessarily for everyone's interest, but for their own interest. And I really feel that to solve for that disconnect, I think we must start understanding the client, right? Start there. We have to understand the client, the company's philosophy. Where do they stand in terms of tolerance with regards to plan spend, right? But let's face it, it's likely increasing and putting financial pressure on the business. And then you have to balance that with tolerance to member disruption. Do they want to cut costs by any means, or are they, truly trying to build the richest plan to attract and retain top talent, especially in this competitive workforce? Needless to say, though, right, most clients out there are probably somewhere in the middle, which is okay, but it's our job to help peel back the onion a bit, peel back the layers of the onion, and to see which way do they lean, and then from there, once we understand the baseline that we're working with for each individual client that we're working with, us as benefit advisors, pharmacy benefit advisors, we can better help them tailor their solutions to achieve their goals.
That makes sense, Simon. I'm curious. So now sitting at a brokerage and a consultancy, how do they have different levers to try to move the dial on pharmacy costs? And they're sitting in also a unique position just between the client and some of their other partners. So what do you see as an advantage to kind of where they're sitting?
Yeah, generally speaking, I don't think it's necessarily about brokers and consultants having or not having access to things, but it's more about understanding how to navigate and how to help their clients navigate all these different levers that are out there to help manage costs, right? Again, going back to my earlier point, it all starts with understanding the client's strategic goals. But that said, there are some exceptions, and one of which, off the top of my head, would be those proprietary pharmacy coalitions. Some brokers have access to, some don't. But in the world of pharmacy benefits, size and scale does matter. And that's how these quote unquote aggregator models, these collaborative models, add value. Here at Connor Strong, we do have access to a proprietary pharmacy coalition called Level Health or Level Care Pharmacy. We offer this coalition to our clients, but most notably, and I want to call this out specifically, is that we don't own or operate it, or even administrate it for that matter, right? Connor Strong, we simply help manage it from a pharmacy consulting standpoint and help market it, but that's it. And what this means ultimately is that we're product and vendor agnostic, unlike some of our bigger competitors in the marketplace. We don't benefit from, from clients using it as a company. We since we began offering Level Health Pharmacy Coalition, it has cumulatively saved upwards of $1.8 billion with a B, for our clients that have decided to use this pharmacy coalition program. So going back to my point about pharmacy coalitions, is that we consider these low-hanging fruit, right, for clients. They're particularly beneficial for clients who are otherwise too small to go out into the open marketplace and get best pricing or competitive pricing. Again, size and scale does matter in this industry. And by joining a coalition, these clients can gain access to competitive pricing. That said, some coalitions are indeed proprietary and can only be accessed through a specific broker or consultant relationship. But many are broker and consultant agnostic, meaning theoretically a self-funded plan could access these directly with or without a broker relationship or a broker or consultant relationship. When I think more aggressively, right, there are aggressive levers that require more careful evaluation, more careful navigation, and just being more judicious in the vetting process and decision-making process. The one that comes to mind would be those patient assistance programs that are out there, right? They present more hurdles for clients and more hoops to jump through for the members, but they can lead to significant savings. many clients and their members aren't even aware that these patient assistance programs are out there, and or if they're built into their plan design. But they can, at the end of the day, greatly benefit members by helping apply savings and financial assistance from the drug manufacturers. And the key is creating a successful and effective communication strategy around the existence of these programs so that members can leverage these programs to generate, again, savings not only for the member, but also the plan. Another lever that I think of when I think about these cost mitigation strategies that's quite aggressive, but not quite, they've been around for a while, but not as frequently deployed, is using pharmacies that are international or what we call drug importation programs, either directly or indirectly through their benefits plan, right? There are more and more vendors that are administering these types of programs, but it is critical that clients understand the pros, the cons, and the risks of these very aggressive solutions. Would I generally recommend this for my clients? Absolutely not. No, but could they be a viable solution for clients who are, ultimately faced with rising healthcare spend that is acting as an existential threat to their business? Possibly, right? I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring all viable solutions to the table. So it's also my job to help vet those solutions, weigh all the pros, cons, risks, and help my clients, again, make the most informed decision.
I think it's interesting that you brought up how effective a communication strategy could be here. And in some ways, it's a little bit of a basic idea to say that people don't necessarily know all of the benefits that they have access to. But do you see that happening sort of widespread with different types of clients, that it's really just that they're not targeting certain employees or classes of employees who could really benefit from, patient assistance programs or things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about how complicated healthcare benefits is in general, and how convoluted the process is, how many different vendors that are out there. There's a term, vendor exhaustion, or just a saturation of vendors out in the marketplace. So I think a communication strategy that targets members and helps them truly understand their benefit plan is key to not only making these solutions effective, but also helping that member navigate and making it less stressful for them, right? These members are already dealing with obviously some type of health condition that they're trying to treat with medication. And the last thing they need to do is be stressed out about the process of how to get that medication. So an effective communication strategy that the client puts out there with the help of their broker or consultant, or even the vendor themselves, is critical to success of these programs.
Mm-hmm. Let me switch gears now. I want to talk about kind of the theme of transparency. And that's in the pharmacy space. That's obviously a word that you hear a lot, but it means different things to different people. So there's a lot of new transparency data available. So there's mandated prescription drug reporting to HHS. There's transparency and coverage data, machine readable files that detail in-network negotiated rates. Do you or have you used this type of data in any way to help inform your client strategy?
At kind of Strong here, we certainly use data all the time when informing client strategy. But in my opinion, because these new transparency data sets are so fresh, I truly believe there are a lot of kinks that do need to be worked out, of not only the collection process, but also the reporting process. So the methodology behind all that, and because of that, we currently rely most heavily on any given client's historical data to inform strategy. This provides us, with micro level detail and insights, so that we can view it as more valuable than any kind of current national data that's currently out there. It also allows us to take a deeper dive into an existing client's data to help inform solutions that are either client specific or at least more aligned with the client specific industry or like-minded peers. That being said, that there's certainly a place for nationwide benchmarks to increase transparency, but I really think I really do think that there's still a lot of work to be done for that data to be fully representative at a macro or nationwide level. So to my earlier point, more importantly, you have to get down to that micro or individual client level. Perfect example, for instance, would be when you talk about NADAC, right? If you've heard of that, the National Average Drug Acquisition Cost data. It is publicly available. It's collected and published by CMS. The most important piece here is to understand that the data is collected by surveying, thousands of retail community pharmacies. We all saw earlier this year, I think it was in April, when the data set noticed this huge shift in the data because a large chain started or stopped reporting. So the methodology of data collection, if it's modified just a little bit, the data itself can be turned on its head. So, unfortunately, a good benchmark simply doesn't exist yet. But I do agree that if or when it does, this type of data will be very valuable to not only plan sponsors, but also us consultants.
There have been 2 lawsuits at this point focused on fiduciary responsibility on the health and benefits side of the business. Johnson & Johnson and Wells Fargo are the employers who have been named, and the plaintiffs claim that the company's group benefit plan fiduciaries breached their duties in selecting the plan's PBM because they relied on a biased consultant to do that, and they failed to negotiate more reasonable contract terms with that PBM. In the J&J case, they rely on the new reporting data to HHS that encompasses plan-related contractual arrangements and expenditures, and they use that to make their case. What's your take on suits like that? Are we going to see more of them? Is there merit to cases like this?
Yeah, I think it's frankly inevitable that there will be more of these to come. And for this reason, I think it's important for employers to understand the incentives, right, and the compensation that are going to their partners, be it their brokers, the PBMs, TPAs, or any vendor partner for that matter, right? Because you truly don't know who is acting in your best interest unless you have that transparency. And it's right now, again, it's difficult to get to that level of understanding. But working with the right partners can certainly help and help bring clarity to all of this. It's a benefit for plan sponsors to work with fiduciary partners and partners who are independent, especially in an industry where there's so much opacity around the financials. And for example, here at Connor Strong, we view independence as being paramount to the way we do business. We approach pharmacy consulting in the way that we do. We are vendor agnostic. We consult our clients, and our objective is to advise them with their best interests in mind, full stop, right? We have a suite of effective solutions. We've pre-vetted them, sometimes pre-negotiated them with competitive pricing and terms. But at the end of the day, our job is simply to arm our clients with the information and knowledge to help them make the most informed decision, not to push solutions on them because Connor Strong has some type of vested interest in that client making that decision, right? So to answer your question, I don't think there could ever be too much transparency again, especially when you consider the industry like we're talking about here. But a lot has to be done more on that front, and I definitely think more can be done moving forward.
It's interesting, at least congressionally, there's been a lot of discussion and activity related to PBMs and the role that they play in rising prescription drug costs. And there's been a lot of different proposals about how you achieve transparency in that space. So there's, fully passing through rebates at the point of sale or making PBMs fiduciaries. There are all these different ideas around just trying to inject more transparency into the space. But there's another piece related to compensation, which is just sort of made me think about that when you said that earlier. So in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, and brokers have to adhere to this now too, you need to disclose your compensation related to how you are servicing the health plan. But a lot of the larger PBMs and TPAs have taken the position that they don't need to be disclosing their compensation in that way. Do you think that, and the whole idea behind it is that plan sponsors could benefit from knowing this information. Do you think that if employers had access to this compensation information, that would help inform their strategy around pharmacy benefits?
Yeah, I think to my earlier point, right, the more transparency, the better. The trick is that there's so many ways to quote unquote hide the money, but you're not going to be able to solve for all that at once. So to my earlier point, the more transparency, the better. I don't think there's ever a situation where there's too much transparency, especially when we're talking about compensation for vendors, whether it be PBMs, brokers, consultants, TPAs, etc. But going back to my earlier point, I keep saying that's why you need to, as clients, you need to choose a vendor who is independent and is going to be a partner fiduciary in those decisions, so that you can hold everybody accountable. You don't want to make a decision blindly without knowing where everybody has some vested interest. And in order to do that, you need to choose a broker and consultant that views independence as the only way that they do business. And that's what we're doing here at Connor Strong.
That was Dr. Simon Leung of Connor Strong. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for listening. For more Leaders Edge podcasts, go to leadersedge.com.